This is a bit of a summary of what we talked about last week, that emotional flashbacks flash us back to childhood fear and shame, and that it's our amygdala, our primitive brain, that hijacks us when that's going on. And one of the things that, as I've been speaking with people over the last few weeks, that's really clear is that some people with a lot of trauma live in a state of emotional flashback almost all the time. So when I look back at my own life, I might see how I was in freeze a lot of the time. Or some people feel a lot of fear or anxiety in their body, and they really feel it pretty much all the time. And so it can just feel like that's normal for us. And in fact, it's not. It's a flashback to the feelings that we had in childhood, and that can be healed. So it's that abandonment, the fear, the shame, and we feel it in our mind body as though it's happening right now. We also believe what we believed at the time, that we were at fault, there's something wrong with us. That's why we weren't safe. That's why we were being hurt. That's why we weren't loved, we weren't connected with, because there's something wrong with us. And we know now in our cognitive mind that that's not true. And a lot of healing then is around remaining in the present moment, having that stability in our body, our breath. We're healing the nervous system as we're doing this work, and that equanimity or stability in the mind as well, that we have the capacity, and that's a gradually building thing, and it also comes and goes. We have the capacity to stay present with ourselves from this moment in time. So, from our adult self right now. So, I wanted to take a few minutes here for people to think or to write it down. So, I'll read these ones. And then if you wanted to reflect for a few minutes after, how do you know, or what is your felt sense of an emotional flashback? It's very common to feel that hopelessness, powerlessness, small, vulnerable, childlike. A lot of people wake up with feeling of dread or fear that doesn't have anything to do with your life right now. So it doesn't make sense that you would wake up afraid, but we do. Or that you have a lot of anxiety that doesn't relate to your present day life. There's no one here shaming you. There's no danger in your environment right now, but we still feel that anxiety. So that's a flashback to what we felt before. And when we feel threatened, that we would respond with one of the flight, fight, freeze, or fawn. And if we're doing that a lot during the day, then that's another indication that we might be in an emotional flashback a lot of the time. And when we sit with that feeling, it feels familiar, like I've always known this, or we might sit with it and have a memory of something that happened when we were 5 or 6 or some age as a child. So let's take a few minutes now just to feel into that in your body. Remember to stay very present. Stay with your breath. Stay with your body. Notice your feet on the floor. Open your eyes if you start getting kind of overwhelmed. What are some of the ways, or what is your felt sense of knowing that you're having an emotional flashback? And then finish your thought or your sentence. And then let's look into what it is that seems to trigger this. So, a lot of the time, we can't really identify. Like, if we wake up with a feeling of fear, we might be able to know, well, when we were a child, that really was the situation. So, there's no specific thing that triggers us into the feeling right now. So, it could be a really long term situation. And then there are also things that kind of bring it into more immediacy or make it more intense. So it could be things like, we hear a tone of voice or someone looks at a certain way. We witness somebody being shamed. we make a mistake or we feel like we've made a mistake, someone's staring at us, we're feeling exposed. We're less resilient when we feel sick or lonely, we're in pain, those kind of things. And authority figures will often do it. We'll get into some kind of defiance or some kind of a what we call a childish response to authority, whether that's our own best wishes for ourselves or somebody else. So let's take a few minutes again now. What are some triggers? What comes to mind? And you could just kind of sit back and notice your body, notice your breath, and write down some things that come to mind or sit and kind of look at them. These are some of the events, some of the specific situations that might trigger that in you. Stay in touch with your body, with your breath. We're not wanting to go back into being triggered. We're just kind of looking at these from a distance. Okay, yeah, sometimes when this happens, I can feel that, or maybe a certain person comes to mind. If we were doing an inquiry, we could look into that. We're just doing kind of a high level noticing. And then bring that to a close. Maintain this awareness, really check in with your body, with your breath. So, the reason we would identify triggers would be so that we could mitigate them somehow. We could either avoid them if it's a person or a situation. If we're being triggered by somebody that we're living with, or a boss, or a child, or some situation that we feel like we can't easily get away from, then we might develop ways to support ourselves through that. And we could do some practice around it. We could talk to somebody. We could get support from friends. There's all kinds of ways we could do that if we can't avoid the trigger. And sometimes we avoid triggers that limit our life a lot. Like we never go to a party because we feel like we're being triggered. And maybe that's something we would want to work with so we're not as triggered into that. So there's a lot of different ways this could happen and no really right answer. So, again, these are some of the resources that we might have. We could remind ourselves that we're safe. So, right now, that might have been a bit, you might have been getting a bit stirred up from the last two things that we were looking at, the triggers, the feeling, the felt sense of it. So, what can you do right now to bring yourself back to a state of stability and less activation in your body? So, one of the things is to remind ourselves that we're safe. Right now, you're not trapped like you might have been as a child. You could get out of most situations. Might take a little while, but a lot of times we have a lot more freedom and a lot more resources than we did as a child. You might need your job because you need the money coming in, but there might be other jobs that you could apply for or different ways that you could work with an abusive boss or something like that. And we always have that option to work with our own body. So when we're feeling pressured or we're feeling, oh, I'm going to make a mistake, I'm going to be shamed or whatever that it's probably not those words in the mind, but there might be that sense of it, then we could stop rushing and we could just take a moment and sit back, notice our breath, be really grounded. Let's take a moment for that now. Notice your whole body, head to toes. Notice your breath. Notice how it feels to breathe. And as you breathe out, you could relax your jaw, your shoulders, and neck. You could take a couple of deep breaths. You could bring your arms up if you wanted. And then breathe out, let your whole body relax. Notice your feet on the floor, your seat. Right now, in this moment, we can always stop and attend to ourselves. Notice our body and breath. And then bring up an image or a felt sense of you at an age. Maybe something came up in the last few minutes. Or an age that you know that you were particularly vulnerable. Things were going on and you were feeling scared or alone. And bring that up into your heart. Not so much to think about it, but just to feel it. What's the felt sense of what it was like to be scared? These emotional flashbacks are like an echo. So if it feels this intense now, there's a certain feeling to it. There's a feeling of dread or fear or being shamed, not good enough. It must have been a lot worse when it was actually happening and you were a child. Could you, as an adult, extend your sympathy to that child, your kindness, your presence? And maybe it would be a really warm hug, or maybe you would tell them something. It wasn't your fault. You're not alone now. What would you want to hear? What would you want to say? And let yourself really feel that connection. And if you're having trouble bringing it up, maybe you could remember a picture of yourself at that age. Oftentimes we look kind of awkward and geeky at that age, whatever it is. What would you feel if you were to have been there with yourself back then as an adult? Many of us have kind of a natural sympathy for children. And at the time, we might have really been down on ourselves, but to look back, maybe there's a softness that's possible. We can really see how we were suffering and offer ourselves some kindness. You're not alone anymore. And if you notice that there's criticism coming up or kind of a hardness, sometimes is the way that works, an unsympathetic kind of attitude or a distance, then that's something that we could continue to work with longer term. Get to know the patterns and how the primitive brain works. What is the purpose or the job of the inner critic? It's usually to keep us safe somehow, even though it's the primitive brain. It doesn't really know what's actually helpful. It's kind of a knee-jerk primitive brain reaction to keep us safe. And one of the ways that it does that is it shames us to preemptively protect us in case we're going to be kicked out, in case we're going to be bullied or shamed or judged. That if we do it first, it feels like it wouldn't hurt so much. And that's actually not true. That's something we can't really just finish that work in a few minutes, but we could be aware of it. If there is that inner critic there, we could say no. We could say, I'm not going to let you talk to me like that. We could say, I want to know more about this. I want to get to be friends with you because this isn't helping. So just breathe into your body and notice your mind, notice your whole body from head to toes. What would it be like if we were actually friends with ourselves, if we stopped criticizing ourselves and supported ourselves fully? If we could give ourselves the kind attention that we didn't have. And even if it's just in your imagination, let yourself feel that now. And then see if you could come to a place in your body where you're just noticing the energy or the sensations. Let go of all the stories, the beliefs, the meanings. Notice the location of the sensation, notice the space all around it. Even if there's something here that feels like fear, from this quiet noticing of it, could it really hurt you? And one way we could look at that is, does it feel like it's here to hurt you? Does it have a bad intention? Or if it's painful, is it trying to make you suffer? And if we were doing a longer inquiry, we might sit with just that, noticing the energy, noticing the space around it, noticing the intention. And if it's not here to hurt us, which it never is, it never has a maliciousness unless there's a story that goes with it, and then we could look at the thoughts about it. But when we sit back with this energy in our body, what we really come to is that it's here to help us, to protect us, to be seen, and just to let everything go except for the actual sensation. Could we be present with that for a moment? Notice the space, the sensation in that space. Notice your body again, your feet on the floor, the movement of your body with your breath. Notice if you're okay as you are right now. And then over the next few minutes, we're going to sit with the opportunity that emotional flashbacks bring to us. So this is undigested material from our childhood, usually, or earlier in our life. It could be yesterday or 20 years ago. But these emotional flashbacks come as well as the thoughts about things and the feelings in our body, the sensations and energies. Those are all stored trauma. And when we become aware of it, we have the opportunity to heal it. So when we don't know what it is, we generally avoid it, or we do something to help soothe it a bit. We might notice that we have a lot of fear, so we're working with the breath, we're working with calming our nervous system. All of that's very helpful too. And as we're using this as an opportunity to heal, what comes up for you around that? So we welcome and validate these feelings. That's a start. Yes, that happened to me, and I really did feel that way. I felt alone, I was hurt, I was afraid. And we might do some inquiry into, so if I wake up in the morning feeling afraid, what's going on there? Or if I feel dread when I'm working and I make a mistake? What's going on there? How did we learn that that was a threat? When did we know that? So we could do some inquiry into that. Let's sit with that for a few minutes. Either what are you flashing back to, or what's the opportunity to heal? What gets in the way of healing often is that we don't feel safe enough to feel the sensation in the body. We don't know what it is. It feels so familiar, but it feels scary. So what might you be able to soften into or to welcome forward? Take a couple of minutes if you feel like writing it down, write it down, otherwise sit with it. Stay really connected with your body and breath. So often there's grief for our missed opportunities as an adult because we were so shut down as a child. There's grief for our actual experiences, the hurt we suffered, the abandonment, the sadness of that. So that might be part of what's coming up too. It wasn't fair and it wasn't our fault. And we've suffered all this time because of it. And would it be okay to really feel that right now? Stay connected in your body, your breath, your feelings. See if you could let them be. I've lost a lot because of childhood trauma. And am I allowing myself to feel what I feel? Especially if it's anger. Anger can be something that feels really scary and that we suppress it, or it could be something that turns us into a protector of ourselves. Sometimes we turn anger against ourselves, which isn't helpful. This is a longer term work that we would do emotionally to look into these things. But just for now, notice what's coming up. Are there things that you might jot down to work with more later? Or right now in this moment, could you allow tears to be here or that righteous anger? Just let it be here. Feel that for another few minutes. If you want, you could put your hand on your heart and really offer yourself some comfort, kindness, compassion. This isn't easy. Being with it now isn't easy, and certainly having experiences of hurt and abandonment as a child was very difficult. And there's this opportunity now to connect with ourselves, to bring forward all of these fears and let them be seen and healed. And there's resistance to that as well as the welcoming to that. And could we let ourselves have exactly the experience that we're having right now? And then over the next minute or so, come back, finish your writing if you're writing something down. And then let's see what came up.